If farmers are not replaced, if we don't have this workforce, we won't be able to feed ourselves.
We have to provide the means to train the next generation of farmers.
Now I really feel at home here. I know that I wouldn't want to be anywhere else than in our fields.
And welcome to a new edition. I'm Nadia Sharby, and this week you find us in the cereal fields of Servan, southeast of Paris, as we put the focus on the uncertain future of French agriculture. While the country remains the agricultural powerhouse of Europe, French farmers are in steep decline, with around 2% fewer every year. Worse still, an ageing workforce and a lack of new blood mean that around 15% of the current contingent is set to retire in the next 5 years, leaving many a homestead with no one to take over. A bleak situation that's been some 30 years in the making.
30 million hectares. That's the agricultural area of France, cultivated by 1,400,000 farm owners.
The 60s, the golden age of French agriculture. At the beginning of the 20th century, the country was made up of 70% farmers. Today, they make up only 3% of the population. And there's a reason for this, a crisis exacerbated by climate change and price drops. In fact, over the past 30 years, almost half of the country's farms have disappeared, a phenomena that's accelerating. The most affected is the dairy sector, a key driver of the economy where only 5% of breeders will be replaced over the next decade. Their main challenge, a drop in the price of milk, an expansion in the number of farms and a steady rise in the price of land. And so in comes the support from the Common Agricultural Policy. In 1980, a French farmer fed 15 people. Today they produce enough food to feed 60. This race in agricultural production comes at a cost. Every year, nearly 60,000 hectares of farmland are disappearing.
These transformations haven't had the same impact. It depends on both the sectors and the territories concerned. For instance, they have benefited cereal growers from the larger Paris basin or provinces in eastern France. At the same time, agriculture is one of those professions most affected by poverty. According to INSEE, 25% of farmers' incomes falls below the poverty line.
So it's no surprise that more and more farmlands are being abandoned, like in the Breton island of Ouessant, where farmers are little by little a thing of the past. In a bid to bring them back, the town hall launched an initiative calling on tenders to provide land and low-cost housing. One couple decided to take the plunge, and for them the stakes are extremely high.
It's a huge financial commitment. We borrowed 130,000 euros and we are 30,000 euros minimum out of pocket.
Up until this point, Marie and Thomas have not managed to pay themselves a salary. Discouraging for tomorrow's farmers.
For more on the difficulties faced by French farmers, I'm joined now by Sophie van der Velde on her vegetable farm. Hello, thank you very much for having us.
Bonjour. Hello.
Now, originally this was a cereal farm that's owned by your parents. Was taking over from them the obvious choice?
No, at first I pursued something that I was passionate about, graphics and video games. I worked for 10 years in that sector, and it was only much later that I decided to come back to the farm. Not to continue the same thing, but to start something new with my own personal experience.
And how did that go down with your parents?
At first they thought it was just a whim on my behalf, that I'd changed my mind. And then they said, "You'll never manage, forget this idea."
So how did you make it happen?
I took the time to train, I visited farmers and market gardeners who were already doing it, and my plan took shape over a few years.
So you've been here now for 4 years, you're also the 4th generation to be working in this area. What's at stake for you, both professionally and personally?
At first it was something I kept to myself, that I wanted to take over the farm. I didn't dare tell my parents, as they would never have agreed. They'd mentally prepared to let go of it completely. So I needed to prove myself on my own as a vegetable gardener, to show I was legitimate. Now I really feel at home here. I know that I wouldn't want to be anywhere else than in our fields. It's a big mental load to bear, but I try not to put too much pressure on myself. If we keep going little by little with all the family's support, we will hopefully be able to keep the farm going and even do things with it we haven't even imagined yet.
And you've made the switch to organic. How hard is it to actually make that change and go to organic despite a growing demand for that here in France?
I made the choice to grow organic vegetables because it would be much more difficult to continue as a cereal farm, as it has been geared up to conventional farming methods and equipment. It would need new investment and would mean a poor yield for the first few years, and we would need more outlets, which are harder to find for cereal and large crop production in general. We can't sell directly to customers like with vegetables. The channels need to exist, so it's more difficult.
And with each farmstead that's left abandoned because there's no one to take over, France gets closer to having to rely on imports to feed itself. Has that issue perhaps been brought to light thanks to the COVID crisis in a way?
I sell with AMAP, a network that sells directly to customers. So I see my customers every week, and they've been loyal to me for a number of years now, so COVID didn't really affect us. But I know that during the first lockdown, a lot of people in the area started to think more about buying locally and directly from producers. I know farmers who never used to sell directly but started then, and they're still doing it now. So it's true that COVID did make people stop and think, and I hope it continues. On the other hand, whether it has had an impact on the authorities or will shape agricultural policy, I can only hope.
Are French and European leaders doing enough to keep this sector alive?
Without financial aid, our farm wouldn't make a profit. It would operate at a loss. So I think the subsidies are necessary and sufficient. But perhaps they don't encourage people enough to change course and try something different if something doesn't work. We're so close to the breadline that it's difficult to take a step back and launch or invest in new projects.
And as a woman, you're in a minority in this profession. According to the latest official figures, women make up just a quarter of homestead owners in France, 30% of the labour force. Why is that, do you think? Tell us about your experience.
It's more difficult to set up a new project as a woman. We're taken less seriously. And since the times are difficult, it's an extra obstacle. It's also hard to balance a family life with children and a project like this. We're forced to make sacrifices.
Those figures also show that 62% of students in long-term agricultural training are women. So is the future of French farming female, perhaps?
Well, I hope so. I think that the more there are of us showing we can do it, the more girls will think, well, why not me?
Sophie Van der Velde, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So how do you spark new callings given all the difficulties of the job? Well, training schools have adapted to the times and to the startup generation and are now prepping would-be farmers with a tasty combination of futuristic high-tech and old-school organic methods.
It was once a well-trodden path for young people in France.
I've loved tractors ever since I was little. Just being able to work outdoors in touch with nature and the earth.
But farming as a vocation has fewer takers these days. Often seen as demanding, lonely and badly paid work, it also has an environmental image problem. This public agricultural college is teaching the next generation of farmers conventional as well as organic farming methods while using new technology. When they're not in the field, students hone their tractor skills on this simulator. Alexia is planning to take over her father's dairy farm. She's keen to help its conversion to organic farming and has plans to open a farm shop to sell directly to customers.
So we can tell people what you're eating comes from right here. It's treated naturally. What motivates me is that I'm helping to feed people, that I'm doing something, living my life for other people.
But not enough children from farming families are compelled by the same sense of duty. The school's director says their intake numbers, though stable, won't make up for the farmers who are due to retire.
If farmers are not replaced, what will probably happen first is that farms group together and become bigger and bigger. But then, a large farm requires more equipment, more investment, but also farm workers. So if we don't have this workforce, we won't be able to feed ourselves.
The answer to this looming crisis lies in attracting more newbies to what has been a difficult business to join. Florent and Sylvie took up organic farming 10 years ago after careers in different fields. At first, they struggled to find land to buy or rent.
The world of agricultural land is very opaque. There are a lot of under-the-table deals to get access to land. We were lucky enough to find a council that wanted to convert some of its terrain to farmland, so we signed a lease with them.
Now they're part of an organisation that supports future organic farmers. Since the pandemic hit, they've seen demand for training surge from people looking for a change of direction.
We need strong organizations that can provide training, promote the exchange of practices, and support the transfer of knowledge from older to younger farmers. We have to decide to provide the means to train the next generation of farmers.
Florent says empowering associations like these is key to appealing to and supporting farmers in a race to replace the old guard and keep up with consumers hungrier than ever for sustainable local produce.
That's it for this edition. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.
Special event.
Hi, I'm Thomas Pesquet. Join me on France 24 and RFI for the entire duration of my next trip called Mission Alpha. Discover life on board the space station, scientific experiments and other moments I will be sharing with you while away from Earth for 6 months.
Follow Thomas Pesquet on board the International Space Station on France 24 and RFI.